How many people would die for the gospel? It's happened through the centuries. Many, many people, even to this day. Not too long ago, there were people who died a martyr's death in Turkey, Yemen, Jordan, Iraq, Iran, various other places throughout the world. Those are folks who are committed to what they really believe. And they believe what they believe is really real. And they're willing to give the ultimate price to serve the Lord. So there's three kinds of believers. And I want to talk about Thomas now that we know that. And I'm going to tell you, Thomas is not a doubting Thomas. Thomas is not a wavering Thomas. Thomas is just like you and me. And from time to time, we need to be reminded that these people in the Bible were not like Bible superheroes, or these guys and gals had something that you and I don't have. They were people who struggle with the same things you and I do. And Thomas was a committed believer. And I want to show you the path that we often take as being a committed believer, okay? You ready? Committed faith often, I could say almost always, begins with some kind of doubt, some kind of uncertainty, some kind of battle there with our belief, and that's not a problem. That's not sin. Temptation is not sin. Just like this is not sin. But what do you do with your doubts? What do you do when you're uncertain? Okay? Because what it can do is it can lead us here to somewhere. Thomas had an honest struggle in his belief that Jesus was alive. The other disciples did too, until they saw Jesus alive, okay? We do too. We all struggle with our faith from time to time. Is it wrong to be like Thomas, to wonder when our world falls apart, when things go crazy in our world? Is God really alive? Is He really there? Does He really care? Does He still love me? Is He still committed to me? Because see, that's exactly what happened to Thomas. Thomas loved Jesus. Oh my, Thomas was loyal when Jesus began to go to Jerusalem, and all the other disciples knew and were warning Jesus, don't go to Jerusalem, they want to kill you there. Thomas was the one who said, let's follow Him so that we may die with Him. Thomas is the only one that said that. He was a loyal, committed follower. He was involved in the life of Jesus. He was very close to Him, and he saw what Jesus went through. He saw what happened to Him. He saw Him die at the hands of the Romans. He saw Him laid in a tomb and was dead. He went through Friday. He went through Saturday. His world had come apart. And that could describe you too, maybe today. And your world has come apart in some way, shape, or form. And you're hurting and you're struggling. And it's at those times, those dark times, like John the Baptist in the prison. I'm telling you, John the Baptist in the prison, that was a very difficult time. Not like prisons we have today. I mean, if people didn't bring you food, you starved to death. Rats, infestation, just putrid conditions, dark, dank, terrible conditions. And in those desperate times, his faith struggled and he needed some reassurance. And you do too, and I do too, from time to time. And so, let's not be hard on Thomas. Let's not give him that terrible nickname of Doubting Thomas. It's moments like these, in these dark, troublesome, hard times, that God does some of His best work. I do a sermon about King David, and you remember King David, he's pursued by King Saul, and there was times when David had to hide out in a cave, and during those times when David was in this cave, and you can read about this in the Psalms, how David's faith grew and how God developed David in the cave. And I love to say that God does some of His best work. Are you hearing me? God does some of His best work in the cave. You look at this story this weekend that we're in right now. Jesus died in the tomb. God does some of His best work in the cave. You need to hold on to that. You need to trust in that. when that feeling of doubt and struggling with our faith and uncertainty and wondering, why is my world going crazy? God is still in control. That's when faith really develops. That's when faith really grows. When you get the pink slip, when you get a mate who's struggling, when you get a family who's struggling, when your health is struggling, with crazy things happen to you, when you lose a loved one, and all these other things that come to all of our life at one time or another, and you wonder, what is going on? God, are you there? God, do you care? Are you really concerned about me and what's going on in my life? And the answer is, yes, he does. The evidence is there. Thomas had it. Thomas had it. Here's the area where Jesus is teaching. Will you see it that way? Teaching Thomas, not criticizing him. Actually, the word there that is translated most of the time, doubt, is not really the best word to be used. But rather, Thomas, why are you becoming an unbeliever? Thomas, believe. Trust in me. It was a critical time. And the thing is, Thomas had the evidence. And this is the evidence that he got and we all get. Thomas was not there when Jesus presented himself to the other disciples. And that's why he said, I'm not going to believe it, you guys, until I see it with my own eyes and touch Jesus with my own hand. He got the evidence from the others. And Jesus is saying, you should believe on that evidence. And we should too. That's how we believe as well. We've got the evidence. And Jesus says here, Thomas, you believe because you've seen me. That's understandable. But blessed are all the folks here in Tecumseh High School cafetorium today because you haven't seen and yet you believe. Yeah, he's speaking to us down through the ages, those who have not seen, yet they believe. Committed faith almost always starts with some kind of honest doubt. And honest doubts then can lead us to spiritual discoveries. Thomas got it. Look at my hands, Jesus said. Put your finger in my side. Now, I have a question for all of us here. Try to imagine the life of Thomas after he said, my Lord and my God. Do you think that Thomas ever struggled with doubt ever again? If he did, it was just a little bit right there, but he remained faithful. How do I know that? Thomas died a terrible martyr's death. Matter of fact, almost all the believers, with the exception of John, died a terrible martyr's death. And for those who need evidence of Jesus' raising from the dead, would you die for a lie? They said the disciples stole the body. If they stole the body and they knew that it was a lie, Jesus wasn't raised from the dead, would you die being crucified upside down for a lie? I don't think so. I mean, terrible types of death. Sawn in half. Hung upside down on a cross. Thomas found some spiritual discovery. And maybe that's happened to you, huh? See, there's going to be these moments in our lives, these defining moments. Oh man, if I've seen it in my life once, I've seen it hundreds of times. These defining moments where this honest struggle with my faith has brought me to a spiritual discovery. How about you? Have you heard the story of Jeff Markin? Have you heard it? Randy, get your finger on the trigger, and Jim as well. I want to share just a brief story of a man by the name of Jeff Markin who wasn't a believer, who became a believer because he had a spiritual defining moment. Please, if you'll show that video at this time.
If you believe in miracles, you probably believe in the power of prayer, especially the power to heal the sick. In our travels, we met up with a doctor whose prescription for good health includes prayer, and you'll be shocked at the results.